issue is you've got to find a comfort zone in terms of where are you physically. And the contract will reflect that for anybody. I guess the question I would have for a team like the Dolphins, and that's the big guessing game right now, we knew it would come down to between Tebow and Manning, what that was going to dominate the landscape. But for Coach Philbin, obviously he's coming in with a very specific mindset in terms of the offense he wants to run. And when you bring in Peyton Manning, it's, okay, Peyton, bring me your playbook, okay? Because that's what we're going to put in. Why would you not put Peyton Manning in an environment that he's most comfortable? So you're going to wrap your entire offense around what he wants to do. And then for whatever time you've rented him, is it 2 years, is it 3 years, hopefully very productive, you then have to go back and start over. Because believe me, what Peyton Manning does is unique to Peyton Manning. I'm not talking just about what he does on the field. If anybody's watched Peyton Manning practice, he runs that entire practice. He'll be in the offensive line drills, telling Jeff Saturday and the line coach, we'll go, no, if you make that call, then we're going to do this. No, I'm going to verbalize it that way. He's in the running back drills saying, no, you've got to take this approach. No, be sitting down here. Once I've gone into my check over here, I'm going to come back there. So you've got to buy into that hook, line, and sinker. And if he's physically okay, great. You've got a great upside. But it would be hard for me to imagine for Coach Philbin, who has a very specific idea of what he wants to begin with and how he wants to progress in his offense, to kind of put that on the back burner. Can't say it won't happen, and obviously you do what your players do best. It would be interesting to hear what those conversations are like.
So you think there is some downside because it's whose team at that point, Philbin's or Peyton Manning?
Exactly right. And there's nothing wrong with that. Believe me, who makes more? Okay, at the end of the day, that's who's in charge. Okay, and when you bring in a Peyton Manning, why would you bring him in and not do what he does best? And that's what a good coach will do. But that has to be an organizational decision. It's not just Miami. All the other teams that are considering him, that has to be a part of the process. And where Miami is, particularly with a new head coach, there's a huge upside, but there's got to be a part of you that says, you're anxious to get on with what it is you want to do and the structure you want to put together.
As a coach, is there a fear that if you bring in Manning, then you have to be the one that tells him, well, we're going to sit you in favor of someone else if he's not physically ready?
First off, when you bring him in, if it doesn't work, it's not Peyton's fault. There's going to be somebody's butt in somebody's briefcase at the end of the day, and it's not going to be Peyton's, okay? Because that guy's got a Super Bowl. He's walking into the Hall of Fame. So, there is a little bit of pressure that it's not going to be Peyton's fault if it doesn't work. So how do I orchestrate that? But still, you're talking about one of the great players of all time. So let's just say, silly to say, but let's just put the physical aspects aside. Let's say he is okay. Anytime you make that transition, keep in mind when Joe Montana, that seems to be the bell cow now that we go to for the analogy, he took his own coordinator. He ran what he ran in San Francisco in Kansas City. And it was successful. A little different, and I give Marty Schottenheimer a great deal of credit. That wasn't Marty ball now. Okay, that was Joe Montana's offense, and they had some success. Ultimately, it wasn't the ultimate success, but they made the playoffs. They did a nice job, but then they had to transition. And then what did they transition to? When you look at Marty's progression in Kansas City, what happened after Joe Montana left? It set back the progression that I imagine Marty, and you'd have to ask Marty. I can't begin to speak for Marty Schottenheimer, but I can't imagine that wasn't a bit of a detour as to what Marty wanted to put together, and then ultimately he ended up leaving Kansas City. So I think there are some analogies to draw from there.
Hey, Brian, what do you see from...
One thing to what you're talking about with investing financially and even with your offense, the problem's going to be, though, you're not going to know in March or April where Peyton is.
Well, yeah.
Is that the big issue, though?
Certainly, and you have to rely, because we're now getting into an area where even the doctors may have a differing opinion. You're talking about, this is not a knee. This is not a shoulder. This is not Tommy John surgery. This is a whole new world. And so what is that time frame? Peyton Manning and his the people he works with are very intelligent. He understands how this works. He's a good businessman. But still, at the end of the day, when a player is at that point in his career where you're close to or at that transition time to where it's time to leave, particularly when you're talking about, look at Troy Aikman in the concussion issues. Troy would have liked to have played on when you visit with Troy, but he prudently did the right thing, and there were some anxieties when he left, because it's like, I'm okay, I can go back and do that. He did the right thing. I know Peyton Manning wants to do the right thing. You've got to follow the counsel of the doctors, which doctors are saying what. But you're right, that's going to be the interesting thing. Are we going to know physically before the draft? Because there are going to be some teams that that might be in that market that are going to make the decision, are they in the Andrew Luck, RG3 market to move up, or some of these other guys? That has to be resolved before the draft. Will that time out to where we will be able to make those physical determinations on a Peyton Manning? It's a unique, I can't think of another time where the time frame has been such, and if it goes beyond the draft, now the teams that are going to be interested have already made that determination. No, they've gone and drafted and done what they've done with the draft. Do you now come back, and now if it's indeed in June or July that we find, okay, yes, Peyton is ready to go, now the market has shrunk. I imagine Peyton and his people would like to get this resolved before the draft, because you're taking buyers off the market after the draft.
What's your evaluation of Robert Griffin?
Very intrigued by him. And this is, we tend to clump players together. And so anytime you talk about an athletic quarterback, oh, he's this. He's counter to that. This is the best. When you talk about the Michael Vicks or the Cam Newtons or the athletic quarterbacks, this is the best throwing athlete I've seen come out in a while. Far better than Michael Vick, in my opinion. Far better than Cam Newton. I'm not going to say the T word here. Mike Mayock would get mad at me if I say the T word. Very intrigued. This guy has a pure throwing action for an athletic quarterback. Clearly has the intelligence to transition. Very intrigued with him as the potential in the NFL. Will translate into the NFL very well, in my opinion.
Hey, Brian, with the Ravens, what do you see from them as far as Ed Reed and Ray Lewis? They've had great careers, but in terms of eventually kind of moving to the next.
Well, it's eventually going to happen for everyone, and Ed Reed a little bit different because of the injuries. There again, it goes back to the conversation we just had. At some point, the doctors or Ed, and Ed, as you know, is very attuned to that. And Ed, the demands on his body and the hits that he takes at some point, and Ed will be prudent, I think, that way. And it may take until the entire offseason to go. When we had Jonathan Ogden, Jonathan could have continued to play, but Jonathan knew because of the toe injury at the end, you know what, I'm not going to do what I know I have to do in the offseason to come back and play. Yeah, I want to keep playing, but I know what that offseason has to be. Ed Reed, I think, is the intelligence, obviously, to see, you know what, I just know I can't or won't do the things I have to do in the offseason in order to play. Ray, gosh, it amazes me. I thought a couple of years ago he was a bit of a liability on third down, and he seemed to bounce back in only the way Ray Lewis can, and needed to be on the field every snap. Amazing. But even for Ray Lewis, at some point, yeah, and Ray has such a high expectation for himself. Again, it's hard for a player sometimes to truly recognize where are you. It's been a while since, but I've had a number of players, my former players, that typically the smart ones will call outside sources and say, Coach, look at my film. Tell me, what is it time for me to go? Because my opinion has changed. It used to be, hey, get out, ahead of the curve. It was no, make them push you out. But because the passion for the game, but only you can decide if you're staying too long. It's a tough question.
Brian, can you talk about Matt Flynn? 2 starts. I don't know if you can say how good a quarterback he is, but can a guy fade from that when teams get film on him?
No, I did the last game. I had the Detroit-Green Bay game, and it was a spectacular game against a team that was highly motivated and pretty good. So it wasn't like a throwaway game and the guy throws 6 touchdowns against a team that was laying down. And he was having to keep up with Matthew Stafford, who had a pretty good game as well. The problem is, and we've been down this road as a league many times, players with a limited database, 2 games. The Cody Carlsons, for those that want to go back, the Rob Johnsons. Now, we've had some players, whether it be a Matt Hasselbeck, whether it be a Schaub, that have gone on and done pretty good. But it's a roll of the dice because you have a limited amount of data. It's not unlike Cam Newton. The tough thing for Cam Newton last year was you had the 1 year, you had 270-plus throws, of which about 20% were applicable to the NFL. That's not a lot of database compared to an Andrew Luck or RG3. They got a lot of throws that extrapolate into this league. So I'm much more comfortable in making that assertion than I was in a Cam Newton. Same thing. Yeah, you like what you see in a Matt Flynn, does it extrapolate into what happens on the entire season? We're going to see all of Matt Flynn in 16 games. Yeah, you're going to pay for that, but what you have to pay versus the risk on a draft choice or some of the other options, probably a pretty good risk. But it is a risk. Pay your money, you take your chances.